This is Public Resource.
First meeting of the Code Improvement Commission will come to order. I'm hoping we can meet possibly even on a monthly basis, but certainly on a quarterly basis. And the idea is that we can begin working together and trying to understand how to make not only the regulations more broadly available, but also related items such as the codes. So we have Unicourt here to talk about the work they're doing on the legislative codes. And so let me turn it over to you, Christina. If you could give us, 5 minutes, 10 minutes max about what it is you're doing here and, any issues you see and if you have a roadmap as to changes you think you're going to be making. So let me turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Nina Jack here from Fastcase. Just a quick introduction of who's with me from Fastcase. We have Ed Walters, who is our CEO. Sean Tate, who is our product manager for data feeds and APIs, and Rachel Johns, who is on Sean's product team, does a lot of our data analysis. So, very briefly, Carl, let me know if I'm going too basic here. I'm not sure what folks know about the relationship between PRO and Fastcase, but we have a data feed of our statutes and our regulations that a number of companies consume, and the team at PRO consumes 50 of our regulations. We are really excited to be partnered with you guys. The updates are quarterly, so they're lagging a little bit on the timeline of what's available on our website. And now we announced this morning that we are merging with CaseMaker. And so that is a little bit of a change to the roadmap that I'm really excited to be able to talk about a little bit today as well. The first delivery that we made was last year, and it was 50 codes and regs to PRO, which the teams at Justia and others kind of massaged and posted on their websites. And we had a lot of good back and forth about how we could improve those deliveries, which we can talk about here if you'd like, Carl, or we can talk about it offline. But in short, we got really great, nicely curated updates on how the content met the requirements and where we could make some changes. So we made the first round of changes for the last delivery, and then we have some plans to make additional changes on the Q1 delivery, which will be packaging up and sending over in the next couple of weeks. So I'll just pause there for a second to see if there are any questions about the relationship or the delivery so far, and then we can talk a little bit about our roadmap with CaseMaker.
No, I don't think we have any questions. You could. So, what kinds of changes shall we be expecting for the January release, the Q4 2020?
Yeah, definitely. So, nothing substantive. Really, just upgrades on the content that we've sent to correct some of the issues that's been pointed out by the Justia team. So, we can go into more detail if you'd like. Otherwise, I can give you just kind of a high level look at some of the issues that we've seen come across. And how we're planning on fixing them. And then I can talk a little bit about how the relationship with CaseMaker won't and will change the way that we're working together.
Yeah, high level would be good. We can go in detail by email and things like that, but just, high level of, we're fixing broken images or things like that would be good. And briefly on the effects of the CaseMaker would be good.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we categorized the issues into three major problems that were occurring, and then there are two sub issues under missing the images issue. So there are content issues, annotations issues, and then images issues. I'll start with annotations because that's the cleanest wrap up that we have. The team at Justia identified a pattern that we hadn't uncovered that basically caused our conversion to break, which we've fixed at the root, like where we collect the content and translate it into Fastcase XML, which is the normalized XML that we deliver to PRO. And so that problem should not occur in any future deliveries. So thanks to the team at Justia, you guys made our platform better too. On the content side, there are a number of issues that we're working on that frankly our QA should have caught. There was some kind of there was an OCR error in there. There was like a bold tag that was missing. And so we're working on our processes to better capture that information. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about that when we move into talking about, how the CaseMaker team will be working with us to, better capture that information and better QA and editorial resources in the future. And then the final issue was missing images. So there were two categories. Well, all right. So there are two categories under images. There were missing images. And so some of those images are missing at the source. We're obviously not able to fix that. We deliver what's at the source. And so sometimes the source will say, we have an image here, and then won't actually include that image. And so, that's a problem that's replicated in our files on Fastcase and then replicated on PRO. The other issue with images is linking to HTML files at the source. And there were a couple of examples that the QA team uncovered at PRO that Fastcase wasn't handling correctly in the feed. And we've figured out how to fix that issue, which is just, handling the link to that external file better than we've been handling it before. So that should not be an issue in the future as well. The other class of issues is missing images that were available at the source. And we're working on collecting those images and figuring out why they're missing. Just to be honest with everyone in the team, we're having a hard time figuring out, when we see an issue like this that our QA didn't catch and that our process didn't catch, we go through a root cause analysis, and we still haven't figured out why the process that we use to pull those images and then store them in a separate file isn't collecting them. Short of checking every single folder and every single file, we're not quite sure how we're going to correct that yet without moving over to the CaseMaker process. And so that's one that we'll just do more QA on when we send the files over to you guys. And we'll let you know, as we keep the changes there coming.
Can you at some point send me a list of a few examples of missing images at the source so I can do a little bit of research on that and see what's going on?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great. Okay, then briefly, the CaseMaker issue, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's so exciting. So we announced this morning that the Fastcase team is merging with the CaseMaker team, which is, it's been a long time in the making. I think the conversations have been going on since 2019. We're just really nicely complementary companies with complementary strengths that have the same mission to, bring access to the law to everybody. The CaseMaker team, I think the most relevant part for this group is that the CaseMaker team has extremely strong editorial processes, especially on the statute and regulation side, which we're very excited to integrate into our platform. And I'll just give you a process example for those of you who are interested. And I'll use the Illinois statutes as an example. The way that Fastcase collects updates for the Illinois statutes is that we go to the page with the all of the public acts, and we collect all of the public acts that were passed yesterday, during the previous day. We download those, have little XML files that are converted from the source, and then we append those updates to the current version of the code so that you can see, what the code looked like yesterday, what it looked like today. It's a great solution for transparency. The problem is that every state handles the way that they release their public acts or their, in the case of regulations, rulemakings differently. So it's not a uniform experience across all libraries. And, as we're moving into additional markets, we're learning that uniform experience is something that lawyers truly do expect, along with the kind of transparency that's really important to us to provide. So, not only do they want to be able to dig in and see what did the legislature say here, and then how did and then how does it affect this code, they also want to be able to read the output and then work backwards. And so that's the capability that that Casemaker brings to us, to be able to normalize those updates across all libraries. And also for our data feed partners, and I think importantly for you guys, to be able to merge all of those updates into one file, which means that we could theoretically deliver updated files more often without the amount of work and QA that we're having to do right now.
Okay.
Carl, if I might be able to add just a macro point on this. The combination of Fastcase and Casemaker won't affect our feed, our arrangement, our relationship in any way. And I think Nina made that very clear. I also would like to say inside the family here, but not for kind of publication outside.
Ed, we're recording this and we may be releasing this material. I'm more than happy to go offline with you later. But if there's something you don't want public, you probably shouldn't be saying it here.
Well, no, I'll say it here and for the public.
Okay.
Inside the family here, the commitment to public law, to making public law public, doesn't change one iota. You're going to see that same ethos in the combined Fastcase and Casemaker as you did in Fastcase before. And I think as you did often in Casemaker before too. I think for the purposes of the Code Commission, you're going to see a very strong commitment from the combined group to public law. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Why don't we move on then to Justia? So we have currently two downstream providers. The feed comes in, and frankly, Public Resource is not even downloading the feed. It's simply up on a Dropbox area. Both Justia and Cornell are ingesting that and have stood them up as websites. So if we could start with Justia, and you could give us a quick overview of what you've done, if you have a roadmap going forward, if you have particular issues that you're worrying about. So I turn it over to you.
Sure. First of all, congratulations, Ed and Fastcase team on the merger that happened. So we were just reading Ambrogi's blog and so congratulations on that one. And also thank you to Carl and Fastcase team for giving us the regulations. So we're putting it up. Obviously, it adds to our collection of data. We're all about free law, so this is obviously complementing whatever we already have out there. So thank you. Before we go on to talking about things. And also from Justia team, we have Tim Stanley. Nobody needs introduction to who Tim is. And also have Dan. He is director of engineering, and he actually has more technical details if anybody later on interested for offline discussions. So he kind of oversaw the whole thing. So our summary should be super quick. The first version obviously was for us to see how the data was, to understand what we were getting, all of the details, and figure out how quickly we can put it up and make it available. So we pretty much focused on understanding the data, what we're getting, and all of those things. In the second round, quarterly update, again, was more focused on how is the update going to be on our end, more figuring out the technical details, right? So you have your first version up. So when you get the updates, what is it that we're going to be doing? in theory, yes, it's all should be simple, but not necessarily when you want to think about the number of files coming in and the images and all of those things. So are we able to quickly put it up, right? So our goal for at least the next 2 quarterly updates is to make the process smooth. So where we can take the data process and, make this well-oiled machine, to say. So that's our roadmap for the next 2 quarterly release for sure. And just like Christina mentioned earlier today, we're also very focused on sending notes over to Fastcase, all of our findings and whatever we're seeing with the data. Put it all together, because we all know how it is to handle a huge amount of data. It is not an easy, simple process, right? So if we all can help out each other, nothing better than that. So we will continue to analyze the data and any findings at all. So we will be compiling the list and we will be sending it over so it can be helpful for everybody else out there. So that pretty much is the summary for whatever is has happened at Justia side and is going to happen for at least the next 2 quarterly updates. So if we change and if we're going to do anything different, we will obviously bring it up in the future meetings that we're going to have.
Vasu, are you keeping a snapshot of each quarter so that if need be, you can go back and compare the differences, or are you simply overwriting your data store?
Raw data is obviously there, but we haven't worked on systematic versioning of any of it yet. But right now, definitely, we do have the raw data, and if we need to implement something, we don't need to scramble to figure out where the data is. But we haven't worked on any of the versioning aspects of it yet.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sarah, for Cornell, please.
Sure. And I will also, as Vasu did, begin with a thank you to PRO, to Fastcase, and to Justia. I think I work for an organization that probably owes a big thank you to everyone on this call. So very much obliged. This is a project that we had hoped to do for many years and are so excited to have been able to bring to the public. Our first release lagged behind Justia's, and a big part of that had to do with being able to wait, knowing that there was already a version that was available to the public in order to make sure that we could have enough infrastructure that we would be able to support subsequent feature development. So a lot of the work of the initial release involved taking the XML that we were receiving and converting it into a format that was more usable and more readily supported feature development. And so that piece is done. We have been filing our quarterly releases in XML, our processed XML and our processed HTML, which has some differences beyond what we've done to the XML, so that we can retrieve and snapshot and compare as we need to. Beyond that, there's a minimal feature set that we have been working with for many years, and that is reflected in what we have published on the website. That includes basic navigation references and web accessibility compliance modifications to the HTML. Beyond that, we have extracted metadata from the corpus and are using that to prototype the next round of features. To step back for a second, one of the things that LAI is able to do that we don't see as much of in the government, but is very familiar to all of the legal publishers here, is to be able to cross the silos of the individual legal corpora and provide some kind of fairly uniform experience. And so the metadata extraction that we have done so far, the first rounds of features that are supported by that are going to be ones that facilitate traversal from the places on the existing website that are well known and receive a lot of traffic to the state regulations, which we think will be valuable to the users. We have discovered in the process that each individual state has its own very special way of referring to federal statutes and regulations, and so our extraction isn't complete yet, but it's certainly shows a lot of promise in terms of making it very easy to see where a particular regulation has rippled out among the states. Beyond that, upcoming, we have some work to do on taking the topic model metadata that we extracted and turning that into a search-based feature that will facilitate topical retrieval from the corpus as an alternative to citation-based retrieval. And beyond that, I think the other big task ahead of us in the immediate future is to do a better job on internal reference regulation, which is another task that involves a lot of just very nitpicky work, as I think everyone on the call would recognize, and also on the agenda for the next quarter is for us to do an evaluation of what we can feasibly accomplish in terms of definition extraction and resolution. Longer term, we have bulk data ambitions, and we are at the point where we are looking at where it makes the most sense to draw the line in terms of balancing stability of what we're releasing with the availability of what we can release. At the moment, what we have, we consider to be a lot more usable, at least to us, than what we're able to do with the raw feed. But on the other hand, it may be worthwhile for other developers who want to reuse XML to be able to count on there being less variation from release to release.
It would, if you could send me a copy of some of your processed XML and HTML to look at, that would be very useful for me to see what it looks like when it gets transformed. Yeah, bulk data is going to be hard to do. You'll notice that I have not posted these archives up on the Internet Archive yet for two reasons. One is it's unlikely that anybody that we don't know is going to be downloading it and processing it and trying to stand up the regs. And so, it's just not worth the hassle. The other is I'm not quite sure it's what we want to be releasing. And I think kind of a 1 year goal is going to be trying to understand how we make our bulk data available for other people that we don't know to be able to ingest and work with, and potentially even giving back to the states, because remember, that's one of our goals here. Okay. So I had three very quick updates on, there's three other vendors that are not here at the table today that we have contracts with. We are working with Innodata, and they are OCR and double keying a number of standards. This is related to our India work. However, they may also be working on some of our U.S. materials. Innodata is a company, so our team is based out of Sri Lanka. They've done good work. They have been translating the Indian Roads Congress standards from OCR scans into pretty clueful HTML. Downstream from that, we are translating those HTML files into 9 different Indian languages using Google's neural network-based machine translation. And so that's not directly related to our work here. Digital Divide Data is a B Corp, a socially minded corporation. We have a team in Laos that has chewed through close to 1,000. So in the Code of Federal Regulations, if you're trying to set a table into the CFR, you don't mark it up in XML, you put a GIF file up. And so there were approximately 1,000 GIF files that were actually tables. And what these folks have done is gone through those, double keyed them, did a QA process, made them accessible HTML, and those are now actually incorporated into the Code of Federal Regulations. They are now beginning to work on our state images. So we have approximately 2,000 tables that we have identified, and they're beginning the process of chewing through those. We are going to push those back upstream to Fastcase if you want to use those. So instead of having a GIF file, you'll have actual HTML you can work with. And we're going to need to figure out a procedure for making sure you get all those. The third vendor is Point B, based out of Oregon. Point B Studio does much higher end work, and that is reverse engineering real diagrams into SVG, taking mathematical formulas and turning them into MathML. And again, as they start to work on the state codes, they've been focused on the federal level up till now. We're going to try to push some of that material upstream as well. So that's where we are on state regulations. We have another team based out of Unicourt. They're out of Mangalore and California. And what they are doing, which is extremely valuable, is so every month what I do is I subscribe to 6 different state codes, as in the official Code of Georgia Annotated. We're talking legislative codes here. We have Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Colorado in addition. And what they are doing is every time I get a CD, I export every title to an RTF file. The RTF file loses all the links, loses all the structure. There's no indented lists. There's no cross links. There's nothing. And they've written some very clever software that's able to turn that back into the kind of code we expect. So if someone from Unicourt could briefly present what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks, Carl. Firstly, excited to be a part of this team here. And thanks, Carl, for having Unicourt, contribute to this project. We're pretty excited to collaborate here. Can everybody see my screen here?
You bet.
Okay, perfect. So like Carl said, the RTF files are uploaded to Internet Archive. We run them, we download them and run them through the text util to get some HTML output. This output is then run through the scripts that are in this particular repository to generate the structured HTML. So all the source code is here on this link. And what we do is for every state that we have converted the state codes, we have created a separate repository, and they are hosted as GitHub pages. So here's one for Georgia. All the releases come up here in the primary index file. So you can basically browse through the release and go through the specific titles here. The same is done with Arkansas. Here. And every quarter when Carl uploads new RTF files, the idea is that we'll pretty much download them and run them through this, and basically do a new release of that particular state. The roadmap that we have for the next quarter is we have these 4 states coming up.
If you could make Tennessee number 2, I'm sorry, we actually have representation in Tennessee, so if you can move that up to after Mississippi. Thanks.
We are currently working on Mississippi, and yeah, you can pick this up.
Okay. Anything else, Prashant? Or?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. No, that's very useful. We have lawyers in Mississippi and Tennessee as well. As you may have seen, I have sent a letter to the Arkansas Code Revision Commission after a presentation was given to them by their vendor saying that the Georgia decision did not impact Arkansas. I sent them a letter and respectfully disagreed with my colleagues from industry, that's their vendor, but also said, here's all your HTML for your code. If we can do anything to help you and work with you, we would appreciate the opportunity. I'm waiting, now that everybody's coming back to work in January, I'm going to attempt to see if perhaps the Arkansas Code Revision Commission would like a brief presentation from me about what it is we're doing so that they can understand the implications of doing this. We have one more group on the line, which is Sushant Sinha from Indian Kanoon. We're doing a lot of work in India. We have the ultimate collection of Indian Gazettes, which are the equivalent of the Federal Register and the equivalent state registers. Getting a lot of hits. It's searchable in all the Indian languages. So if Sushant, if you could briefly explain what it is you're doing, in particular your transformation of the Gazettes into XML into Indian Kanoon, that would be useful.
Past year I run Indian Kanoon in India. It's a full search repository of court judgments and laws in India. And last year I was working with Carl on a couple of things. One was aggregating all the gazettes of all the states in this union. And second part was actually to make them fully searchable in Indian languages. So we zeroed down on the Google OCR API, and we hooked it up with the archive ABI output. So you can actually search the full Indian gazettes in all the Indian languages on the Internet Archive. So we have almost digitized close to 500,000 gazettes and books, almost 6 million pages till now. The work is still ongoing in some ways. Some books and other stuff needs to be done. And the second part was we also wanted to have more structural output of the gazettes. So there are gazettes which are 2-column gazettes. There are tables in the gazettes. So we want to automatically figure those out. So we are also doing a software to help that, to convert directly from PDF file to HTML, which is actually well structured. With, of course, some human intervention, but that should be minimized as much as possible. So that is something I will be working closely with Carl in Q1 on getting that done so that we can take a gazette from India and convert it into HTML. And then we also move forward in the year going forward to actually convert it into a Comma Natoso format. So I actually run a website for all the Comma Natoso formatted Indian laws. So the idea is to update all the laws and keep adding the new laws on the website using this tool. Of course, with some human efforts at whatever is required. The other small bits I worked with Carl was on the automatically generating the subtitles from a video. So that is one that also hooks up to the Google API for speech recognition. And also I worked on translating it into Indian languages, translating subtitles into various Indian languages. So there is a tool we have released which you can just run and convert all your subtitles into as many Indian languages as you want. of course, that also uses the Google API. So that's just a bridge, really, to do the things.
So there's two bigger pictures in Sushant's work. All his code is general purpose. So we needed to run optical character recognition in Indian languages on the Gazettes, but that code has also been applied to several 100,000 books on the Internet Archive. And so we're systematically working our way through all the Tamil books, all the Kannada books, all the Malayalam books, and making them all searchable. His code for machine language translation works on subtitles. It works on HTML. So we have been translating Indian Rhodes Congress standards into Indian languages. And then that software also permits crowdsourcing for better translations. So if you don't like the way this word was translated into that language, you can upload a glossary file and the neural network then adjusts itself. And so we're attempting to use that code on Indian standards and Rhodes and things like that. The work on the Gazettes is actually got a much bigger picture. There was recently a letter sent into the Ministry of Law and Justice, and I was actually honored to be the only foreigner signing, but a whole bunch of Indian lawyers signed, and they essentially, it's the equivalent of what happened in the United States during the Panama hot oil cases, in which it turns out in India, a lot of people don't know what the current state of the law is. And by people, I mean judges and lawyers, because a regulation is promulgated, it's amended, it's amended, it's amended. And at the end of the day, you really have no idea what the actual current status is. Our Gazette database is actually being queried by lawyers in actual court cases in order to try to understand what it is that the current status is of a regulation. And so the broader push here is a more systematic process of administrative law. And we're doing it the way we always do things, which is showing by doing. So one of Sushant's main goals this year is going to be extracting content from the official gazettes, turning those into XML, and being able to compare those to the actual regulations and laws and other things that are out there. So that's kind of the long-term play there. I have one more brief update, and then we can turn this over to general discussion. David Halpern is on the line. David is of counsel to Public Resource, has worked with me for many years since I started Public Resource. So I mentioned that we have sent a letter to Arkansas saying, hey, we've got the Code Revision Commission, annotated codes available. Can we do anything to work with you and help you? We have representation in Mississippi, and we are beginning the process of trying to understand what it is we can do in Mississippi, which asserts copyright over their laws and their regulations. If you go to the Secretary of State's site, it says right there, the laws of Mississippi are copyrighted by the state of Mississippi. I'm not sure that conforms to our understanding of the common law. We are working with the Vanderbilt clinic in Tennessee, and we will begin starting this month to work with them as to what is it we can do with the Tennessee code. The firm of Cooley, one of the leading Silicon Valley law firms, now represents us, and we have sent Public Records Act requests to the state of California. We asked for a copy of the California Code of Regulations in XML. We also sent a similar letter to the Building Standards Commission because they've carved out the building codes, and we've done the same thing. Our intent is to move forward with the possibility of a declaratory relief action. The California Constitution enshrined the Public Records Act. So in California, our Public Records Act is actually a result of a proposition, of a vote by the people, which led to a constitutional amendment, which then mandated that the legislature promulgate the Public Records Act as we know it today. So it is deeply constitutionally based. In Washington, we have two things going on. I am leading a task force with a number of groups, including the Wikipedia, including the Internet Archive, EFF, a number of commercial players, to look at the Open Courts Act and potentially recommend a different way of approaching the problem. As currently implemented, the Open Courts Act would not make PACER free for 5 years, and during those 5 years would levy increased increase surcharges on so-called power users. And at the end of 5 years, it wouldn't be free because anyone who wants all of Pacer would have to pay big bucks. And we don't think that's a good situation. The other thing that David and I are examining is a potential petition to the Office of the Federal Register, to the Office of Management and Budget, suggesting that perhaps the Code of Federal Regulations could be presented in a better format, that it could be accessible to the visually impaired as required by U.S. law, that perhaps instead of incorporating by reference, we simply incorporate, right? So that right now we have estimated 30% of the Code of Federal Regulations is not accessible because they're documents that are incorporated by reference and you can only get them from private parties. So that's a brief overview of our legal effort. We're going to base the legal effort on top of the technical effort. And so the goal here is to be able to go to the states and say, hi, we're not just simply walking around here saying you're doing a bad job. We're here to help you. We have put this stuff online. We have people actually using this stuff. We understand what we're doing. What can we do to help you do a better job of promulgating the law? So that's the overall. I'd like to turn it over for general discussion. We've got several issues. At some point, we need to make bulk data available. I know everybody wants to do time travel, right? Be able to show red lines. And then all sorts of relevance and keywords and things like that are obviously things that could be extracted out of this material. So let me turn it over for general discussion. Does anyone have any comments? Surely there's got to be at least one. Bulk data, Sarah, when do you think we should be aiming to make bulk data available? Do you have any indication as to where that might be on the timeline?
I think the answer to that depends on the preferences of the consumers of the bulk data, honestly. And so I think we need to do, our next step is to do more in-depth discussions with the people who will be using it to see what their preferences and requirements are. As it stands, the regulations are packaged up in a way that could be reused by lots of people. It's just that the features that make it a little bit easier to work with are a work in progress. And there is a balance between where we are in terms of that feature development and making the product more stable and making the bulk data available. And so I don't think it's really wise to set a timeline on it without having a little bit more from the point of view of people who are going to reuse it. I think the other piece of it is that we're probably going to look at where the starting point for bulk data might want to be, given the amazing QA effort that has gone into the last couple of releases and all of the improvements in the source text that have been made. So that's one that I think within this group we'd be wise to step through a little bit more so that we can think about the best starting point for that public release.
Do we have any indication who a downstream user might be? I know with the Arkansas legislative code, we have an app developer in Arkansas that's digesting what Unicourt did and is coming up with a Mac app. Do we have potential users in our sites, or are we simply speculating at this point? Like, I was wondering if we have people in our sites, if we can drag them into the conversation, that might be useful.
We've talked to a number of people who have asked us for APIs in the past. I don't see that being significantly different, except insofar as there are probably users at individual state levels that it would be a mistake for us to proceed without consulting.
So Waldo Jackwith is at Georgetown now and is very heavily focused on helping states do a better job. He was the person who came up with the states decoded format that was used in Virginia and other places. It sounds like maybe Waldo, Sarah, myself, maybe Sushant could begin an initial discussion. One of the questions I'd like to think about is whether your current intermediate format, your current XML and HTML, might form the basis of an interim bulk distribution maybe later this year, and bringing in the users to work with us to understand how that might be transformed in a way that would make sense. As you said, we need to keep looking upstream and, understanding what it is we're doing different from what Fastcase gives us. And so we definitely want to consider that. It's not out of the question. We simply take the Fastcase releases and throw them out. But I think our downstream users are going to want a little bit more, particularly if all you're doing is putting one state up, right? If you're not willing to go through and do the whole shebang, if all you want to do is quickly, build an iPhone app, for example, for your state regs, it would be important to understand what those folks do. So let's form a working group. Anyone else who wants to participate in that discussion is welcome to. I'm dragging Sushant in simply because he is very familiar with a lot of the XML work that needs to be done like you. He's had to really go through a lot of that stuff. So he can help us out on some of those issues.
I had a quick question on that. Is there any write-up on how the whole feed comes in and how it is processed and how the final output is generated?
No, but we do have a DTD for the XML that we receive. I'm more than happy to share the dumps with you. You can look at it and see what they're like. There is an issue of naming. To me, it's unclear if you have a citation to a state reg, how you can guess what the URL is going to be, right? The mapping between an actual citation and what tend to be very long file names is not something that without a lookup table, I think I would be able to do that mapping. One of my goals is always to be able to take an external document, right, that is not in that world, but happens to cite in our case, state regulations, and be able to construct pointers to those without having to go in and look each one up. So one of the things we love about Cornell is that if you have a US code citation in whatever it is, law paper, you can, without looking at Cornell, you can construct a pointer to that section of the US code. And I think it's going to be important with state regs, particularly if lawyers begin using our work, that we are able to go from a citation to a URL at some point. And so I think that's an issue with the bulk stuff.
And we can provide more documentation on where we've gotten in that process as well, if that is of use to others.
Yeah, our goal, Sushant, in 2020 was, first of all, just to get through the damn year, but it was also to get this stuff up and running quickly. And so the goal was, rather than sit down and examine everything we have, fix it, get it ready, I asked Justia to get it up as quickly as they can, and I asked Sarah if she could at least stand the regs up for all 50 states, by the end of the year. That means we can walk into 2021 and kind of roll up our sleeves and say, okay, what do we got to do? Remember, we have 2 dumps so far out of 60, right? We have 58 more quarterly dumps coming. So we have a long roadmap here of do I have my numbers right? No, I'm sorry. We have 20 dumps total. We have 2 already, and we have another 18 coming, right? 4 per year. And our goal is, this year, make it better, but we don't have to solve every problem this year. We just need to be on a roadmap that over the next couple of years is turning this into something that really is production ready. And hopefully with downstream users, I want to see iPhone apps. I want to see states potentially working with our material. I would love to donate their diagrams back to them as SVG and MathML and HTML and see them begin to use them on their websites. So I think this year is when we come up with that strategy and come up with the working groups and try to understand how we can systematically over the next few years make this happen. We have a real luxury, which is unusual in our nonprofit world, of being able to plan ahead for a few years. And so I want us to take advantage of that luxury and see if we can do something really top-notch, professional grade, and really like fix these regs and make them better.
Carl, can I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dan and Vasu and the Justia team, Sarah and Craig and the Cornell team for all of the comments and additional QA on these regs. The output looks very consistent when we deliver it, but we're harvesting it from a million different unstandard standards. The source materials, I think, because of their obscurity, are in terrible shape. The missing images is one example of it, but multiple code sections with the same citations, or places where the codes are out of order. We are culminating a multi-year process to kind of get these online, including converting some of the regulations from paper. And the output, although it looks very homogeneous and clean as we're delivering it, is from a million different formats. So Rachel Johns, Sean Tate on our team, Rupesh Barugu, Nina Jack, and others have done like a mountain of QA on it, but it's boiling the ocean. I mean, there's going to be a million issues. And as those of you who have worked with large volumes of data before know, to really get this in a great workable format is going to take a few iterations. So I really appreciate the hard work you guys have put into it, the very detailed work. And I think your patience also with us as we really try to get this unruly mass of regulations into a stable, consistent, predictable format. So thank you.
Well, and thank you, Ed, for being willing to do this, because this is really a big step forward, I believe. Is getting regulations of all 50 states much more broadly available than they were is no different than the earlier efforts to, make appellate courts and the U.S. code and materials of that sort available. It's generating a tremendous amount of goodwill among people we care about, such as law librarians and working lawyers. So it's having an impact, the work that you folks are doing. It's going to make a difference.
We always appreciate your leadership in it too, Carl.
My pleasure. All right. Anything else? I would then suggest that we terminate this meeting. Thank you so much for your time. Do we want monthly meetings or do we want quarterly meetings? Any indication there? I can do this offline if you want, but anyone have any preferences? Meet more often, less often?
One thing I might add is, at least at the outset, quarterly with the deliveries might make good sense. A good chance to debrief after we deliver them. And if people feel like we need to have more frequent meetings, we can certainly do that.
Okay, so maybe quarterly, roughly 30 days after the delivery, so people have had time to ingest it, and we can go over the issues we found and give you some early feedback on what it is we'd like to see in the next delivery. That makes sense.
Quarterly works for Justia folks.
Got it. I know we all have too many Zoom meetings in our life, so I don't want to overburden us with these things. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time. This first meeting of the Code Improvement Commission is gavelled out. Thank you for your time.
Our work at Public Resource is made possible by a generous grant from Arcadia. Arcadia, a charitable fund of Lisbeth Rousing and Peter Baldwin. Additional support provided by contributions from citizens like you. Thank you for your support. Public Resource is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation with headquarters in the state of California and dedicated to the principle that access to knowledge is a human right.